Okay. Hello, everybody. Wait, can I get a confirmation that it's being recorded?
It says recording, yes.
Okay, cool. Hello, everybody. My name is Veronica Sanchez. I use she, they pronouns. As Megan had mentioned, I'm a fourth-year anthropology major. And today, I will be presenting on UndocuQueer activism and the use of art as a tool for resistance. And so I will be going over about a little bit on the agenda, including my research question, background and context, my framework, research methods, and of course, my findings. And so what does artivism or art activism imply? Artivism refers to the use of art or cultural production as a tool for political engagement and advocacy. According to author Min-Jae Kong, artivism is used as a radical approach to engage in social spatial issues through the arts projects. It is meant to bridge our community together and disrupt marginalizing powers. And although most visual art is designed to be interpreted by the viewer, artivism generally has a clear intention and is meant to encourage political and social change, as well as fostering feelings of acceptance for the viewer. And so I ask, how does UndocuQueer art aid in identity formation, and how can cultural production act as a form of resistance for the undocumented community? So I hypothesize that UndocuQueer artists use art as a political tool for social change, all while gaining agency and engaging in queer world making. Now, activist art publicly criticizes those in power, and this disruption of heteronormative and xenophobic ideologies places those in power in a very uncomfortable position where they may be forced to acknowledge such art. This art can be seen through the lens of Foucault's Parrhesia. The term refers to the act of speaking truth to superior power through critique while taking the risk of retaliation. And so it makes sense that artivism is utilized by the UndocuQueer community as a viable tool for political and social change. Human rights activist and former government official Susan Noel states that the fear of art and the fear of civil disobedience is what gives artivists power as they engage in this disruption of techno-social spaces. Agency gained through the denouncement of oppressing systematic violences is in its totality the greatest outcome for UndocuQueers. The notion of queer non-citizens reclaiming identity through the arts itself is an act of political warfare. So I focus on three principal components of UndocuQueer-based art. So first we see cultural production and how it's used as a means for queer world making, and it's essential for cultivation of belongingness. Second, we see the role of UndocuQueer art as affirmation of agency, as well as a greater intersectional political consciousness. Here, political consciousness is defined as a set of political beliefs and action orientations arising out of awareness of similarity. Lastly, cultural production as a means to engage in political advocacy with fewer ramifications, such as deportation or being outed. I mentioned retaliation of such art can always place danger, even if this danger includes major consequences, such as deportation. And so I have a few policies that I will briefly go over, including the Immigration Act of 1965. So the immigration laws in the 60s amended to include sexual deviation as medical grounds for refusal or denial of entrance or asylum in the United States. And so immigration officers could use this intimidation tactic as a form of kind of not letting immigrants pass through, even if they themselves didn't identify as being queer, but if they suspected them to have this sexual deviation, they would not be allowed into the United States. In 1996, we also have the Marriage and Defense Act that specifically specifies that marriage is between a man and a woman, making it difficult for binational couples to petition for their spouses for citizenship. And we also have, around the Obama era in 2010, 2012, we begin to see this idea of undocumented and queer. So in 2010, we have the Coming Out of the Shadows event, which was created by the Immigrant Youth League that was hosted in Chicago in 2010. Coming Out of the Shadow essentially encourages undocumented and queer youth, or just undocumented youth in general, to come out in front of their school with a mic and just kind of say, we're coming out as being undocumented and just owning up to their status. And so in my research, I utilized 3 frameworks, including the identity mobilization model framework, counterspace framework, and the visual testimonio. For me, the visual testimonio model is probably one of the most important, as it combines social movement research on education strategy and allyship to explain how members of a marginalized group who do not hold formal recognition under the law contest this form of exclusion and fight for increased rights. So you have the 3 main pillars, which is testimonio or self-narrative, or as an act of resistance, or as an act of political protest, and of course, the critical race theory. And so my methods includes an artistic media production analysis, as well as primary and secondary sources, including interviews and articles. And in the future, I would like to include platicas and semi-structured interviews, dependent on IRB approval. So my first example is of the Transporter Immigrant Tool app, which was created by UC San Diego professor Ricardo Dominguez and his lab, which is called Electronic Disturbance Theater 2.0 Bang Lab. And so essentially their research included that of using art as a form of, I guess, not political protest, but more in terms of like helping the undocumented and immigrant community. So the 2011 phone app was created to guide individuals migrating to the United States through the US-Mexican borderlands. So you have this phone application that was meant to be distributed around places like Ciudad Juarez, as well as Tijuana. And so what this research lab, or what this professor wanted to do, was to have what was called kind of like experimental poetry. I'm not really sure how to explain it, but it was more like survival tips in using poetry as a guise to kind of help immigrants. And so you had this GPS, they wanted to place this in cheap GPS-enabled Motorola phones so that individuals passing through the desert could have GPS-dependent survival information, such as possible water caches, food caches, as well as safer routes. But later on, the lab came under investigation because of being sued by 3 Republican congressmen. So like I mentioned, both the FBI and UCOP began to conduct this very intense investigation for both the research assistants and the professor. And so as you can see, this type of, I guess, art and research was looked down upon and was seen as a national and security threat. And so after the investigation was over, they found that there wasn't any wrongdoing and that the funding and research conducted by both the professor and the lab was, it was okay, but the phone app did have to become archived. And out of all of the archival poetry that I could find was this one, so I'll read it to you right now. It says, choya, or jumping cactus, attaches. A bud of spines breaks off at the slightest touch. Remove choya from your skin, clothing in increments with rock, a stick, a knife, the bud. Large spines left behind, small spines or chlorichids. Needling needles that remain will work themselves ahead in the coming days. So I think it's very interesting that like poetry like this was seen as a national threat, and it wasn't able to be distributed to its intended audience. In a hyperallergic online art magazine, Dominguez notes that this made the project too dangerous for migrants to use, since narcotraficantes kill people for just about anything that might alert US border agents that a crossing is happening. So in 2011, there was a lot of violence happening within the borderlands, but I personally also see this fear being placed by these marginalizing powers, these people in power. And so, you know, I can only imagine the research assistants and the students also feeling very vulnerable to even create art like this. And yeah, this is what would have been placed in those phone applications. And so I also want to go over DJ Sizzle. So DJ Sizzle Fantastic is an artist and entrepreneur born in Guerrero, Mexico, and she was raised in Boyle Heights, California. Currently, she's a director and co-founder of Cumbiaton, a national-wide event paying homage to Afro-Latinx culture and music. So during multiple interviews, she has discussed her role in activism and creating space for the undocumented and queer community in LA. So Cumbiaton came about during the election year when the 45th was running for presidency back in 2016. Cumbiaton was officially launched in 2017 and was co-founded by both DJ Sizzle and Norms La Oaxaqueña. They both come from organizing labor and immigrant rights organizations, and being both undocumented and within the DJ scene, they wanted to hold this space and cultivate just a space for healing and feeling safe while there was a lot of uncertainty going around at the time. She mentions that she wanted to get together with a few of her friends and at a bar somewhere and just play music and, you know, provide space for each other. She mentions how it started off with a party of maybe 35 people in a small billiard in Boyle Heights, but later this, you know, Cumbiaton movement had grown to spaces and the bigger venues that fit up to 1,000 to 1,500 people. And so as of 2024, they're in their 7th year of Cumbiaton. Is still being led by women, by undocumented people, by queer people, trans, Black, Indigenous folks. And basically, it's at the core of their membership to provide this space for healing and for cultivating belongingness, as I had mentioned in previous slides. Another individual that has made a big impact in Los Angeles is Edwin Soto Salcedo. So they are program manager for SAG-AFTRA and an advocacy director for Somos Loud, specifically for Somos Loud. They support and facilitate events like Undocumented Tales film series, and also continue to advocate within movements relating to the undocumented and UndocuQueer struggle. And so in a few interviews, they've mentioned that after attending Columbia College in Chicago, they felt that their queerness and undocumented status can be celebrated through the arts. And they also felt that it couldn't be separated. And although they were really involved in immigrant rights movement, they felt that being undocumented and queer just held such a big space for themselves and within their identity. And so they talk about the importance of art as political activism, but also as a way of healing and as self-narrative. They say that he mentions how we can visualize and reconceptualize the non-citizen body, advocacy through queer lens, acceptance of self beyond status. As UndocuQueers, we create space of being, even if it goes against heteronormative norms. And so Salcedo shows through photography and through all his organizing that the simple act of publicly announcing that you're undocumented and you are queer really opens up the doors for this creation of identity, affirmation, and collective community. And so other people have, you know, a space where they can come out and continue to create art. And again, just like DJ Sizzle and Edwin, you know, create a space where they're making political and social change, but also creating a space for themselves. And so, yeah, I'd like to acknowledge my advisor, Dr. Covadonga, Lamar, Prieto, as well as Dr. Xochitl C. Chavez for the mentorship, and a shout out to my MMUF coordinators and fellow researchers at UC Riverside. Thank you for all of y'all for listening to my presentation, and here's my bibliography if you're interested.
Wonderful job. And I see other applause icons. So I would like to open it up for questions.